Hello. Welcome to our English at Leeds Trinity podcast. That's a podcast made by students and staff studying English at Leeds Trinity University, and we're showcasing our enjoyment of every different aspect of English, whether that's literature, creative writing, language, other languages. I'm Richard Saarah. I'm a lecturer in English at Leeds Trinity, and I'm very pleased that I'm joined today by 5 students studying English at Leeds Trinity, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Hannah.
Hi, I'm Saarah.
Hi, I'm Humaira.
Hi, I'm Imi.
Hello, I'm Ben.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And we get an extra bonus from having Imi here because it's good to have someone in the room whose name begins with I. Because the way we plan these episodes is that we're working our way through the alphabet. And this episode, we have arrived at the letter I. And when we were thinking about how we were going to do this, first of all, we thought we might just pick one topic that begins with I and talk about that. But then we kind of gradually evolved into a different idea, which was that we would each choose a word beginning with I and say something about that. And so that would, in a sense, represent each person's individual choice. It's a little bit like the principle of I spy with my little eye. We're not going to play that, but if you think about how that works, you choose something that you can see that gets your attention, and then you try to get other people to see that. And so we're going to do that with words beginning with I. Now, there's quite a lot of us in the studio. It's kind of buzzing, and therefore you will probably hear quite a lot of these. Which are apparently called stingers. And when you hear one of those, that means that we may just have been moving the microphones around a little bit to make sure everybody is in the right place to say their piece. Now, I'm going to start. What I'm going to talk about is actually the letter I, because there's a couple of interesting things about that to me. And first of all, what always strikes me about this, it's not unique, but it's one of those letters where what we call the letter I is not a very good guide to how we actually use the letter. So if we go back to Old English, we find there that the letter I, as I understand it, is used to represent 2 sounds, but they're basically the same sound. It's just one is short and one is long. So it's always going to be either I or E. That is a kind of simpler system than what we've got now, where we find that the letter is still used a lot for the sound I. It's not used all that much anymore for the sound E, because we tend to spell that with other letters like double E or IE or EI, but it is used also for the sound I, which is actually not just one sound but 2 sounds, RE. So it's a word letter that has contributed its fair share to the complexities of English spelling. But the other interesting thing about it is, of course, it's one of those letters that can be a word in itself, and a really important word, a kind of word that's come down from the prehistory of English, the word I. A word that is a word in itself. Not only that, when you use it as a pronoun, it's also a noun phrase in itself. So I is a really fundamental word, and the interesting thing about it is that we all use it to mean ourselves, and so every time we use it, it's being used to mean something different from when anybody else uses it. It's a good example, if you like, of a concept in linguistics, in semantics, sense and reference, the difference between those 2 things. Sense is your knowledge of how to use the word, and we all know what the sense of I is. Reference is the person or thing in the world that you mean when you use the word. And of course, that's always different. So it's always got the same sense, always got a different reference. So it's quite a handy little example like that. So what we're going to do now is go on to Hannah, and you've chosen a word beginning with I, so away you go.
Yeah, the word I chose is Istanbul. And that's because I'm really interested in history and the countries of the world. And Istanbul has a very extensive history. And I picked it particularly because of all the different names that it has. Found out that Istanbul has been given more foreign names than any other city. But all the names that I know it from is Constantinople, Constantinia, Lagos, New Rome, Istanbul, which is kind of a play on words, and Istanbul. Also Byzantium and Augusta Antonina. I like all these words. They all mean different things, and they say a lot about the history, and I just picked it because I'm very interested in history.
I'm glad you picked a place name, because that is a fascinating aspect of studying language and the history of language, isn't it? And this one is it's a place name which kind of has it's a place that has had more names than almost anywhere else, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think we know a lot of countries whose names have changed or they have different names, but Istanbul is a city that kind of really stuck out to me with having so many names.
Yeah. I think the one it's got now, Istanbul, is the one that I think that's pretty much established, isn't it? But that one in itself, it's interesting. They overlap so much because that one has been around for centuries, while the other ones have also been in play. So it's strange. Now, other foreign names. I think you had one that you knew of, Ben.
Yeah, there was one called that it was from North Scandinavia. It was Miklagard, and it refers to it as the greatest city. Gard obviously meaning either like landmass or city in that Scandinavian origin. So yeah, but I don't know where Mikla comes from. That's a bit of one that I am stuck on.
Well, I think that's something to do with great.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Yeah, so the Vikings, amazingly, if you look at the map, kind of made their way all the way down the sort of back route to Istanbul from Scandinavia, kind of going across Russia. And so to them, it was like the most amazing place in the world, I suppose, that sort of a city unlike anything that they had back home or that they came across on their travels. So, the sort of place of kind of aspiration, I suppose, or sort of wonder, which I think in many ways it's had all through the centuries. That's them. I think I'm the only one, though, on what we said in the conversation, I'm the only one who's actually been there. So I think for everyone else, it's maybe an aspiration to go there. Could be. And to me, because I have been there quite a long time ago, but it does have sort of particular connotations for me as well. I went while I was on one of these interrailing, that's another I word, interrail, travelling around Europe on whatever train you like. And I went with a group of other people. And at that time, Turkey was not included in the interrail ticket. And so we didn't intend to go there. But then after we were halfway around our travels, the other people started saying that they would be interested in going there. Well, I happened to have a very kind of, at that moment, a very sort of negative view of Turkey. To me, that was like going off the map and into sort of dangerous territory. And I was really kind of uneasy at going. But I went along with what they did. And of course, it was like the highlight of the trip, really, once we got there. Such an interesting place, so different, so memorable. And so to me, it's a reminder of that idea that you shouldn't let your fears determine all your decisions, because it may well be not nearly the way that you fear it is. And that's definitely the case. That's so Istanbul means that to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a place I'd like to go to. I've been to Turkey before, but I've not been to Istanbul particularly, but I would like to, especially having learned so much about it and my interest in history.
Well, and all that history, a lot of it is there, isn't it? I mean, so you're in the place where it's all happened, which I think is amazing. Right, okay, thank you. So really interesting place name there. And so we will go on now to Imi and tell us what your I word is.
So my I word was if. which is a word of many possibilities and many spellings, because if you go back far enough, it's Germanic, and it has had many spellings over the years. And Rudyard Kipling did a poem titled If in the 1890s, which is like a dummy's guide to how to be a man.
Right. Okay. And I think everybody is probably familiar with that poem. It is a kind of, one of the best known of English poems. It's called If, and it just, every 2 lines, it starts, if you can,
Yeah.
something or other. That's yeah. Right. I mean, I think it's a great word. It's such a little word, isn't it? If. And if you think about it, it is the key to a whole different way of using language, because most of the time we use language to describe things that are actually happening in the world. That everything we said about Istanbul, we were talking about things that we believe to be true, and some of it which we'd actually checked as well. If you put the word if in front of what you're saying, you're not actually saying it's true. You're just kind of talking about something that might happen, something that a world of possibility. What was it you said, Imi, a world of many possibilities?
Yeah.
So you're conjuring up that, aren't you? Just with that tiny little word, it kind of opens up a whole new dimension to the way you use language, not to describe things as they are, but things that could be, but aren't. So you're not saying they are, but you're saying they could be, imagining that. So it's a really kind of creative word of creative possibilities, isn't it?
Yeah, and it can be both positive and negative, which again is unusual for a word in the English language.
Right, yeah. There was a famous film in the 1960s called If, and there is another one about to come out. By the time this podcast goes out, everyone will have seen it, also called If. So you know anything about it?
I know that. Is it John Krasinski, the guy from the American Office? He is directing it. But apart from that...
Right.
Is it something about imaginary creatures?
I think that's it, isn't it? It in the film. It's surprising that I'm best informed about this, but that's not usually the case with new films. But If stands for imaginary friends, and it's something to do with seeing imaginary friends. Apparently, it's quite moving. I suppose because that's all to do with your childhood and the world. But it's interesting that they've done that acronym, imaginary friends, but it sort of connects with what we were just talking about. If is that possibilities, things that aren't necessarily real, but they could be important. So it's one to watch.
Yeah, and it's got that creative aspect of it, like that you were saying.
Yeah. Right, okay, thank you very much. And we are now going to Saarah. Word beginning with I that you've chosen.
I chose the word incredulous, and I found this word interesting because it has Latin root from the words credere, which means believe, and credulous, which means believing and trusting. There's also the Latin word in, which means not, so together it means that incredulous translates to not believing or not trusting.
Right, yeah. So it's one of those words that has just basically come into English, kind of ready-made. There's a Latin word just like it, and at some point in the sort of late Middle Ages, Renaissance period, they've just said, well, we need that word now in English, and incredulous has popped up. And then another one that's sort of similar that I thought of when you said it is incredible. And that similarly is just made up from those Latin parts. In being this thing that makes things negative, that prefix. So incredulous. Can you think of a sentence in which you could use the word incredulous?
He was incredulous that he missed the Northern Light.
Right, yes. You missed them. Okay, yes. Did anybody see the Northern Lights, by the way?
I didn't know.
No.
I knew they were there, but I said, no, I'm sleeping. I can't.
All right. Okay.
I meant to stay up the second night to watch them, but then I fell asleep again, so
Yeah.
I missed them as well.
Right.
I think I gave up at 12:30. I was like, they're not here. I can't be bothered. I was still there.
Okay, well, I think you did. You stayed up till then. So just gone down a diversion there. Incredulous, then, yes. So not believing. I think the interesting thing there is also the connection with the word incredible, which I think we would use more often than we use incredulous these days. I think it's probably more frequent. And yet it's incredible has got this interesting thing going on with it, that literally means something which you can't believe. It's not capable of being believed because it's, I don't know how unlikely, it's something about it you can't believe. But it has kind of, most of the time that the word incredible is now used is different.
Like amazing.
Yeah, that's it, yes. Now you were saying, Humaira, you've got the word for that when the word turns from being something bad to something good.
Amelioration, where the sense of a word was once positive and was it once positive? Yeah.
Negative.
Now has negative connotations to it.
Say it again. It's the other way around. Yeah.
Okay, negative connotations in the beginning, and then now it has positive connotations to it.
That's it, isn't it? Because the original meaning of incredible must have been dismissing something because it was just not believable. Yeah. Now, if you say that was incredible, you're not saying I can't take that seriously because it was rubbish. You're saying I take it very seriously. It was so good.
So you go from being kind of a cynical person that doesn't believe in something, and it kind of you become someone who's, it's outstanding to them.
Yes,
and they do believe it.
That's true. You become a very positive person.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's quite a nice thing that's happened with the word there. That's it. So that process of amelioration, and with both incredulous and incredible, this is what's really interesting, I think, to look these words up in the OED. Besides the etymology and stuff that you found out, they change their meaning quite early on, and so they start that process of amelioration. We can find with incredible that after, I think, about 150 or so years after it first appears, there's an example of it being used in that sense of that was amazing or great. And actually with incredulous as well, within about 50 years of it being used to mean something, a person not believing, we can find examples of it being used to mean incredible, something that can't be believed. So these words sort of come into the language and then they start to kind of get played around with in terms of their use. So that's a good one. And it's a reminder of how many words we've got from that kind of period. I think incredible first came about 1420, incredulous about 1578. So many words in that period have just been kind of imported from Latin. So that's a topic for another day. That's a nice long word, incredulous. So now, are you going to tell us your word, Humaira?
I had the word ick, I-C-K, which is actually in the recent years on social media kind of has blown up in a sense. What it means, I think, this additional sense what the OED has, is a feeling of distaste or revulsion, but is especially one when, in a relationship, you find something unpleasant in them, like a certain behaviour. So it's like that's the ick that you get from them.
Right. So that's a new set. That's kind of hot off the press from the OED, isn't it?
I found that when looking at them, it's always the really strangest behaviours.
Yeah.
It's really odd, or even tiny little things that people say over.
I think ick is a kind of light-hearted word rather than something terrible that someone could do that would definitely put you off. It's a silly little unreasonable thing that you don't like about what they do.
Yeah. I mean, there's another word for that which is gone on social media called red flags, so you totally avoid them. And icks are more kind of subtle, I guess.
Right.
It's kind of almost a bit childish in a way, like ick, when you say it's icky, a bit it doesn't take it as seriously, whereas a red flag is that's a warning.
I think red flag is more descriptive, whereas ick is, you can't explain why. Ick kind of explains, it defines something that you don't like, but it doesn't describe why you don't like it. Ick is just something you don't like, and that's it.
In terms of its etymology, it just says related to icky as a noun and adjective, probably ultimately of imitative origin, but probably influenced semantically by association with sick. So to make someone sick.
Right. So there is a kind of, because that obviously that word has all these connotations of revulsion and disgust, doesn't it? And so if it's a word that makes you think of that, that's kind of generating those kind of feelings. I did come across this one. I don't think I knew it before, but it was used in a TV drama just recently, the TV detective drama Beyond Paradise. There, the context was someone quite old doing online dating, and then announcing next day, no, it went well at first, but then he gave me the ick, or I got the ick, or whatever. So that's a sense that perhaps it's got going, and now it's actually being adopted by older generations, and so that's probably a sign that soon it will start to fade away. But ick, such a strange word. But the thing I was thinking about it was, of course, it is not the only word ick in the history of English, because that brings us back to what we were saying at the beginning, the word I. If we look it up in the OED, ick, another entry for ick is for that. It's just an earlier form of the word I, meaning myself.
In German.
And like in German, ich, that as well. And then so all different spellings, like the German one, and then ones that are sort of IH or things like that. And one of the variants that's listed is ICK, the exact same word. So it kind of brings us back to the idea of I. It's an ancient word, and now it's become also, it's taken on a new life as a extremely modern phenomenon. Yeah, for these poor unfortunate people who do something that probably isn't really bad in itself, but it just
Eat someone up.
I was thinking that ick is kind of a bit like an onomatopoeia. If you think like just like ich kind of thing when you're disgusted.
I think that's what they mean when they say imitative.
Yeah.
They think somehow or other it's some kind of like yuck, I suppose.
It does say one of the uses is as like an interjection. So if you like find something disgusting, then you would be like, ich, like nice sort of.
Ick, yeah. Okay, so that's taken us quite a long way from the other places that we've been. Not so much about aspiration, that one, is it? It's more about
The opposite.
the opposite, yeah. And so now it's over to you, Ben. What was your word going to be?
So my word is ideology, and I mainly just wanted to do this section because it's something that I've studied a lot over the past few months doing my dissertation. But I mainly just wanted to address that it's kind of not a word that I think people should be afraid of, because they see it or hear it and think, here's someone talking philosophy to us.
Yeah.
And, it sounds really complicated. And while it does come from its like philosophical roots, with it being, it comes from French ideology. I can't pronounce it in French because my French pronunciation is absolutely shocking.
Anybody else want to have a go?
Yeah, dude, feel free.
No.
You did.
I can try. I'd assume ideology, something like that.
That's good.
That sounds good, yeah.
Yeah.
You got the je sound there, didn't you?
But it comes from the splitting of the word, so idea, which is that idea, and then logi, which means the study of, so the study of ideas. That's its original sense of the word. Since then, with philosophers like Karl Marx, Louis Althusser, it's become a lot more extensive than it ever was. Other meanings are things like the study of the way in which ideas are expressed in language, which is a very interesting one because it relates directly to the language itself. There's abstract speculation, or impractical or visionary theory. So that whole concept of, not necessarily existing, something that is incredulous, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
People don't believe it.
Something that people are incredulous about.
Yeah, I guess that's the right way of saying it. And then the one that I focused on more in my dissertation was sort of the systemic scheme of ideas, usually relating to politics, economics, or society. So when we think ideology, we usually refer to the socially dominant classes who impose their ideology on lower classes. So those things, Louis Althusser who I've already mentioned, did a lot of research around ideological state apparatus, talking about how, like, sort of these different, what would you describe them as? Sort of, state apparatus of society, church, things like all.
Oh, institutions, in a way. Yes, yes.
So
that they kind of, they act as sort of generators and perpetuators of the set of ideas that we don't even really know that they are ideas. We just take them to be for granted, or they are the ideas. They are the way the world is.
So it's kind of that question, like, who decides what goes in the media, who spurs those ideologies on.
Yeah.
The thing I focused on within my dissertation specifically was how is language used to shape particular ideologies, especially in the context of American Psycho, where I've spoken about the anti-American ideologies that exist within a book about the American dream and sort of, or the extremities of the American dream.
So this is the novel by film, or both?
Novel initially, I think 1991, and then film in like early 2000s. I want to say 2001.
Right, by
Bret Easton Ellis.
Ellis, yeah.
Yes, I was going to. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know anything about American Psycho, but with ideology, I was going to say. I mean, I agree with what you were saying. That I found that the OED entry didn't really kind of cover all the complexity of the different ways it's used, as you mentioned, Althusser and Marx and everything, because I find that perhaps what's difficult about the word ideology is that it is supposed to be a set of ideas that in a way you don't even realise they're ideas.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be hard to understand because it's actually in some respects invisible to you if it's working.
I mean, this is like one of the things I wanted to address, and because it is so extreme and there are so many different definitions, no theorist has ever really seemed to land on one specific one, which is why it's so vast. Like any idea within ideology can be studied extensively, and it just depends on the context and where you want to take it. So mine was like really, really niche, studying the style and the language within a novel, and then addressing it or like linking it to ideologies of America. Like it's quite a weird sort of area to research.
But I think, like you say, there's that sense in which where we can get into it is by thinking about how ideology makes its way into language, and so you can always be looking at language and thinking about it in terms of those that systematic deployment of ideas that's sort of going through there.
Yeah.
And so your dissertation, that's presumably a text, American Psycho, that you've always wanted to, or you've always had an interest in doing a major study of.
I wouldn't say always had an interest. I think I would have read it when I was young.
Right, yeah. No, I gather, everybody keeps saying this, so there's lots of things in it that got to be careful with.
Yes, it's very full-on reading. But no, I initially read it for the first time, I want to say about a year ago.
So not always.
I was just sort of gripped by this, because there's so many like specific style elements from the author himself that it's just really sort of odd. And they kind of hooked me in, and I was thinking, like, how does this link to the themes of like Americanism and stuff like that, and what does it actually say? It's like a almost satirical commentary of society, but that's sort of, and then it also shapes like sort of identities as well. Like ideology and identity kind of coincide with one another when you're analysing a text and a character, and it's really interesting to go down that route as well. I'm not going to talk about identities as much in depth as I did in my dissertation, because that is too many terms, but it definitely has its ties in with sort of that sense of I and identity and things there.
Well, we should definitely add that one to the list, identity. And one thing I found interesting about that word, just looking it up, was the root of that is also Latin, like incredulous, but it's the word, the iden part is the word idem, which means same. So identity literally means your sameness to something else, which is, now that's, so in other words, your identity is about who you are the same as, or what you are the same as, which is slightly at odds with the way we often think of it, which is it's about how you're not the same as anybody else. But even then, I think what you're often saying is, I am the same as, I'm trying to be the same as what I really am. In other words, I'm trying to make sure my outward appearance is true to myself, and so that's the sense of the sameness. But it has got that kind of that paradox about it as well. That identity is both sameness and uniqueness. Thank you very much for that. I'm sorry we can't go more on Bret Easton Ellis and American Psycho. So it's not a horror story.
I'd maybe say more of a thriller. I think the
psychological thriller. I think
the film definitely takes the horror aspects in a more comedic route. Right. I mean, with sort of Christian Bale's portrayal of the character, but in the book it is a little bit more horror-esque.
So you also recommend it, Hannah?
I do. I think that the writing style is very, very clever. It's very, very descriptive. And there's a lot of care taken into each thing, but it's quite scary as well how descriptive it is. I think it does make you feel uneasy. The amount of attention that the narrator puts onto everything is reflective of Patrick Bateman's mindset.
Right. So it's a sort of disturbing experience of language.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, that was interestingly one of the things that I did look at is its mind style. So like how he reflects a particular individual sense of self through his mind, and how Ellis shows that through language. So.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your words there. We're just going to do one more thing before we finish, which is kind of following on from the identity theme. And that is, I try to have in each of our episodes something that's, we've talked about something literary already with Bret Easton Ellis' American Psycho. But we have a poem as well to finish, which the poem is one that several of you have studied with me in our poetry course in the first year. And that is the poem by John Clare called I Am. That's just generally what it's called. I don't think it actually has a title, but it starts with the words I am. A short poem that's it's interesting to mention this because when we're making this, it will be long gone by the time we get this episode out. It's actually this week happens to be Mental Health Awareness Week, and John Clare, the 19th century poet, suffered a kind of collapse in his mental health when he was kind of middle-aged, and spent the last several decades of his life in what was called then an asylum, which was kind of like a hospital. And this poem seems to be coming from a moment fairly early in that experience. Now, we're going to hear it in a minute, but another interesting thing about this is that this poem, a lot of people find they can relate well to it. And so it has been read lots of times on YouTube. And so if you want to hear it, there are lots of different versions of it out there, all kinds of different ones. We've got, we've had a look at a few of them. There's one read by the actor Tom Hiddleston. There's one we just discovered today by Michael Sheen. There's one by an actor called Joey Akabizi. Yep. Where he's actually reading it to the camera. We actually see, he's doing it kind of live. And there's also a version of it where it's recited by two people as part of the TV series Penny Dreadful, which I'm not sure anybody knows, but that's a very kind of full of literary allusions kind of TV series. That's a very sort of powerful reading of the poem. We had a little sort of poll amongst us which version of the poem online we thought was the one that worked best. Anybody like to say what their favourite was?
Tom Hiddleston one is very good. I think a lot of people know him, so I think it's quite nice to have someone familiar read out the poem.
Yeah. Yes, and it was one that was very clear.
Yeah.
I think although I know Tom Hiddleston and I've seen him act and everything, I felt like he lost his touch when it came to the actual reading of it. With the Joey Akubizis, I felt like it had a more somber tone. It actually regarded mental illness and depression and everything, and it was, I think, visually really more accurate.
Yeah. So that's a powerful one. Anybody want to speak for any of the others?
Again, probably Tom Hiddleston. I think it's one of those things where it's really nice to sort of see someone who you recognise. I don't know the others really well, but someone that you recognise and brings you that, I guess, a bit of comfort especially around such a delicate topic and something that is really like serious. It's a bit more reassuring. You know, it's acknowledgement that he's human too, and also probably has felt those feelings before. So I think, for that reason, you know, even though he's a celebrity and well known and has everything he probably wants or needs, he also has experience and can express it through poetry.
And can I just add, I think a lot of people think or are under the impression that celebrities are very detached from reality. And in some ways they are with normal people like us. But I think it's also nice in that way that a celebrity would read a poem about mental health and struggles of a normal person, which I think would touch a lot of people's hearts. I think that's why you've probably chosen.
Right. I mention this because I think that when you're studying poetry and individual poems, part of what you can be studying is the way in which these poems have been represented on screen now and online. There's a huge sort of range of things. For some poems like this, there's so much. For others, there's maybe only one, and there's definitely room for more. But each one represents a kind of way of engaging with the poem, and so it's quite interesting to discuss. But I'm also very much a believer, credulous I am, in in reading poetry aloud. And so when we are studying some of these poems, part of the assessment is that I encourage everybody to do their own reading of the poem, their own recitation, because although it is just like what you said, Hannah, in fact, you don't have to be a great actor to do justice to the poem or to produce an interesting version of it. So it is always interesting to get other people's voices of it. And so we're going to actually hear the poem now, just to finish. This is a recording made by a student who's done this course with me just a few years before. And I think it's really good. And to me, it speaks that everybody can have a go at reading, and it may produce something amazing, because I really like this version that the student has produced. So we'll just hear that.
I Am by John Clare. I am, yet what I am none cares or knows. My friends forsake me like a memory lost. I am the self-consumer of my woes. They rise and vanish in oblivious host, like shadows in love's frenzied, stifled throes. And yet I am, and live, like vapours tossed into the nothingness of scorn and noise, into the living sea of waking dreams, where there is neither sense of life or joys, but the vast shipwreck of my life's esteems. Even the dearest that I loved the best are strange, nay, rather stranger than the rest. I long for scenes where man hath never trod, a place where woman never smiled or wept, there to abide with my Creator, God, and sleep as I in childhood sweetly slept, untroubling and untroubled where I lie, the grass below, above the vaulted sky.
Right, well, I really like that version. It's interesting to hear it in a female voice. It's interesting to hear it with a kind of Yorkshire accent. What did anyone else think?
Yeah, I thought it had quite a lot of emotion in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like how it was read out by a young person, which I also haven't heard yet.
Thank you, and thank you to the student who read that. They said I could use the poem, by all means, but keep it anonymous. So anyway, well done for that reading. And that, I think, is the end of our My Little Eye episode. And so I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to Hannah, Saarah, Humaira, Imi and Ben. We will be back with our next episode on J. We're going to be thinking about nonsense words and made-up words, and that's going to be J is for Jabberwocky. So looking forward to that. For now, thank you.
Thank you.
You can find out more about English at Leeds Trinity from our Leeds Trinity University website at www.leeds.ac.uk, and also from our at Leeds Trinity channel on YouTube and our X, formerly Twitter account at LTU English. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Steve Oxon and FesleyanStudios.com for this music, which is called Rio After Dark.